Hello, so this is chapter 3.1 from the textbook, Simplifying Surds. So first of all, we're going to start with a few rules for surds. So here we go. So the first one, if the nth root of x is equal to y, then y to the power of n will equal x. So the cubed root of 8, or 8 to the cube to the third root, is equal to 2. Therefore, 2 to the power of 3 will equal 8. The next one, so if we've got the square root of 4 squared, it will equal 4. And if we've got the square root of 4 squared, that will also equal 4. The next one we've got is the square root of x times y is the same as the square root of x times the square root of y. So you can see that I've just written that out with numbers for you. So this is only if x is greater than 0 and y is greater than 0. Same with the rule above. Now that's because you can't have the square root of a negative number. That's an imaginary number. And if you think about that logically, it should make sense, because a square root means what number multiplied by itself equals that. So two negatives give you a positive, so you can't actually end up with a negative there. All right, rule number 4 is that the square root of x divided by y is the same as the square root of x divided by the square root of y. Now this is if x is greater than or equal to 0 and if y is greater than 0. That is because you cannot divide a number by 0. So the y on the bottom here, the denominator, has to be greater than 0. Otherwise it's an undefined calculation. All right, now, when we're doing these, we want to look for square factors. So square factors are the factors of a number, so the factors being what two numbers multiply into that number. And we're looking for the square numbers because then they simplify down to whole numbers. So let's just quickly jot down our square numbers. So we need to refer to these and keep thinking about them. So 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 4 is 16, 5 times 5, 6 times 6, 7 times 7, 8 times 8, 9 times 9, and 10 times 10, etc. Okay, here we go. Examples of simplifying surds. So, the square root of 32. So what I'm trying to do here is come up with two factors or more, but try to get two factors of 32, and we want one of them to be a square number or a square factor. So 2 times 16 in this case works. So I can rewrite that as 16 times 2, which is the same as the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. The square root of 16 is 4 times the square root of 2. All right, number 2, 3 times the square root of 100. So again, we're looking for square factors. It helps to have the factors written down, and then you can, the square factors written down, you can keep looking at them. That'll help you a lot. So straight away I can see 100. 3 times 100 will work here. So if I do 3 times the square root of 100 times 2, that becomes 3 times the square root of 100 times the square root of 2, which is 3 times 10 times the square root of 2, which becomes 30 to the square root of 2. Now, you don't need to do all that working out. I'm just putting it all down there so you can see it. Next one, 5 times the square root of 40 divided by 6. So, again, look for a square factor of 40. Straight away I can see 4 and 10. So that becomes 5 times the square root of 4 times 10 over 6, which becomes 5 times 2 to the square root of 10 over 6, which becomes 10 to the square root of 10 over 6. Now what we can do is we've got whole numbers here. So you've got 10, we've got factors, so we've got 10 times the square root of 10 over 6. So what I can do is simplify here. There's two ways to think of this. I can just go, well, what goes into both 10 and 6? Well, 2 does. So I can divide top and bottom by 2, and that becomes 5 times the square root of 10 over 3. The other way is to write it out as factors. So if I wrote this out as 5 times 2 and this became 2 times 3, they would cancel and it would leave 5 to the square root of 10 over 3. It doesn't matter which way you think of that, whichever way is easier. All right, next one, we've got the square root of 75 over 9. So again, we're looking for square factors. 9 is already a square factor. And I can see 75, 25 will go into that. So this becomes 25 times 3 is 75 over 9, which becomes, I can rewrite this as, to make it a bit easier. All right, and then that becomes 5 over the square root of 3 over, and the square root of 3 is 3. And that can't be simplified anymore because 5 and 3 are both prime numbers. Now the last thing we can do is actually go the opposite way, and we can express surds as the square root of a positive integer. So what we actually want to do here is get rid of this number sitting out the front. So what I can do here is do the opposite. So if I square 2, I get 4. So I can rewrite 2 as the square root of 4 times the square root of 5, which I can then join up to become the square root of 20. And same thing over here. I can write 2, I can actually write as, I can write 7 as the square root of 49. So that becomes square root of 49 times the square root of 2, which becomes the square root of 98. All right, I hope that helps.